The morning sun spilled over the horizon, painting golden streaks across the fields. I walked along the rows of corn, my boots crunching on the dry soil, my hands grazing the stalks. This was my life. Simple, honest, grounded in the rhythms of the land. People often assume a farmer's life is small, that our ambitions are limited to planting and harvesting. They don't see the years of learning, experimenting, and adapting it takes to master the soil. I was alone in the barn, inspecting the latest soil sensors we had installed. These weren't just gadgets. They were the culmination of decades of work. Each sensor measured moisture, nutrient levels, pH, and microclimates. When I first invented them in 1987, the idea was simple. Stop guessing, start knowing. Data would tell the truth, even when people didn't. Farming wasn't just about crops. It was about resilience, about patience, about decisions that mattered, even if no one noticed. I looked at the sensor readings on my tablet. Perfect. The soil was rich, the irrigation balanced. The technology worked. And yet, outside the farm, things were quietly unraveling. I'd called a meeting with Brandon, my son, and his wife Chelsea, along with Maggie, my attorney, and Chairman Morrison from the town council. I hadn't done this lightly. What I was about to say would shake the foundation of our family, and I knew it. But some truths don't wait. They don't wait for comfort or convenience. They demand attention. Brandon entered the room, his posture defensive, like a man expecting confrontation, but not ready for the reality of it. Chelsea followed, scrolling on her phone, oblivious or indifferent, I couldn't tell which. They had spent years in the shadow of this farm, living off what they thought was a stable foundation, but ignorance doesn't make it real. "Dad, you wanted to see us?" Brandon asked, feigning casual concern. "Yes," I said, voice calm but firm. "We need to talk about agritechs, about the farm, and about choices." He frowned. "Choices? What do you mean?" I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I let the silence hang. Silence carries weight in ways words sometimes cannot. I looked around the room. Maggie's notebook was open, pen ready. Chairman Morrison watched, uncertain. Brandon shifted uncomfortably, the first cracks in his confidence beginning to show. Chelsea's fingers paused mid-scroll. "You've made some decisions recently. Decisions that affect not just your life, but the lives of everyone here. Decisions that weren't yours to make." Brandon blinked, confused. "Dad, You don't know? Of course you don't. You assumed. You assumed because I wear overalls, drive a pickup, and speak plainly that I don't understand finance, that I don't understand power of attorney documents, that I don't understand the value of what I've built. You were wrong." Chelsea looked up, a flicker of concern finally breaking through her distraction. Brandon, however, still seemed lost, his confidence slowly unraveling as he realized the gravity of the moment. "Let me remind you," I said, my voice rising, eyes locked on his. "Agritech's innovations didn't exist for money. It existed for farming, for the soil, for data, for the work that sustains life. Every patent, every product, every innovation, all of it was designed to serve farmers, not to line pockets. And yet you thought it was fair to take what you didn't earn." He opened his mouth, closed it. Maggie's hand flew to her mouth. The room was silent, the kind of silence that precedes storms. I turned back to the windows, looking out over the land that had been in our family for generations. The sun was higher now, spilling light over the fields and the barn. This was where life began, and this was where truth would be faced. I didn't need anger. I didn't need theatrics. I needed accountability. And that's what part one of this story is about. The calm before the storm, the weight of inheritance, and the reckoning that begins when entitlement meets reality. The room felt smaller now, the air thick, heavy with anticipation. Brandon shifted in his seat, glancing at Chelsea, as if seeking some silent reassurance, but there was none. Maggie, calm and precise, leafed through her legal documents, her eyes sharp, unblinking. Chairman Morrison leaned back, trying to maintain composure, but I could see it in his eyes. He was realizing this was bigger than any council meeting he'd ever attended. I took a deep breath. Brandon, it's time we talk about what you did, about selling property that didn't belong to you. His expression flickered between confusion and panic. Dad, I didn't sell anything without your knowledge. I thought— You thought what? I interrupted. That because you imagined I might die soon, or because I'm just a farmer, you could make decisions for me? Decisions about millions of dollars? Chelsea's hand flew to her mouth. Her eyes darted between Brandon and me, the realization slowly sinking in. Maggie stepped forward, producing a folder. I've reviewed the documents. The power of attorney you showed the bank, Brandon, it only covers medical decisions. Financial transactions? You never had authority. Brandon's face went pale. Wait, what? That can't be right. The lawyer said— What lawyer? Maggie asked, voice cold. He hesitated, eyes darting to Chelsea. Some lawyer. Chelsea found him online. He said it covered all financial decisions. And you believed him without checking the actual document? He stammered. I thought it was fine. You thought, I said, voice rising. You didn't know. You made assumptions. Assumptions that cost you and me millions. Every decision you made was based on your ego, not on truth. Chelsea was quiet now, tears brimming but unshed, her body trembling. She looked smaller somehow, caught in a storm she hadn't fully understood until this moment. The farm, the land, the company, you treated it like it was disposable, I continued, my voice steady, measured. Do you know what $485 million represents? That's 37 years of solving problems for farmers, innovating, building something real, something that mattered. And you thought you could take it, spend it on vacations and Instagram dreams, and call it your own? Brandon's hands shook. Dad, I didn't mean— I didn't mean, I echoed, letting the words hang. Fraud isn't an accident. Theft isn't a misunderstanding. You falsified documents. You lied to a bank. You sold property without permission. This isn't a mistake, Brandon. This is a choice. Multiple choices over multiple days. Chelsea's sobs began quietly, then louder, her body trembling. Maggie took notes, her pen scratching across the page like a gavel striking truth. Chairman Morrison adjusted his glasses, his face pale. This is serious, he muttered. Yes, it is, and it's going to be addressed. Legally, morally, practically. Brandon, you have a chance here. You can cooperate, make restitution, face what you've done, or you can pretend you're the victim. But the truth doesn't bend to excuses. Brandon stared at the floor. I thought I was protecting the family, securing our future. You were securing your lifestyle, I said, voice calm but cutting, not the family's future. You work for Midwest Farm Supply, making $78,000 a year. That's your connection to our family's financial future. Until today, that's it. And now, you're unemployed, effective immediately. His head snapped up. You can't do that. I just did, Maggie said, pulling out her phone. "Termination notice was sent an hour ago. You no longer have authority at the company." The color drained from Brandon's face. Chelsea gasped, stepping back as if to put distance between herself and reality. This isn't fair," she whispered. Fairness wasn't the point. Accountability was. "You sold property that wasn't yours," I said, letting each word sink in. "You spent money that wasn't yours. You committed crimes, civil, criminal, and moral. And now you'll face the consequences." Brandon's lips trembled. "Consequences? What do you mean?" "Civil liability," Maggie interjected, $2.6 million. "Criminal investigation starting tomorrow. Fraud in the first degree, theft in the first degree, falsifying documents, Class B felonies." Chelsea's phone slipped from her hand. We don't have that kind of money," she cried. "You spent some of it already," I said. $96,000 on a 6-week vacation, $14,000 on a consulting business that hasn't even begun to bring in clients. The rest is still owed. You're going to repay it, whether you earn it honestly or through restitution arrangements. Brandon's hands curled into fists. "You're destroying my life." "I'm revealing it," I corrected. "You built a house of cards on lies, theft, and disrespect. I'm just showing it for what it is." Chelsea's tears streamed freely now. Brandon slumped into his chair, the reality of the situation crushing him. Maggie's pen still scratched, recording every word, every detail. Chairman Morrison shook his head, stunned, unable to fully comprehend the family betrayal unfolding before him. I looked out the window at the farm beyond, the crop swaying gently in the autumn wind. "Brandon, this is your reckoning. The choices you made brought this storm. You can face it with honesty or continue to hide in lies. The law will decide the rest." The room was silent, save for Chelsea's quiet sobs. Brandon's eyes, once full of arrogance, now reflected fear, shame, and the first flickers of understanding. I took a step back. "You have until tomorrow morning to decide. Cooperation or defiance. Honesty or continued deception. The choice is yours, but the truth? It doesn't wait, and neither will justice." The tension was palpable. Every heartbeat in that room echoed the reckoning that had begun. The calm before the storm was over. The real consequences were about to arrive. The tension in the council room was suffocating. Brandon sat slumped in the chair, his hands still trembling, his jaw tight, as if willing himself into some alternate reality where none of this had happened. Chelsea clung to the edge of the table, tears streaming unchecked, muttering incomprehensible fragments about how this could have happened, and the lawyer said it was fine. Every word sounded hollow, like a script rehearsed but never understood. Maggie, still calm, flipped through her legal notes, her pen scratching in deliberate rhythm as she prepared to outline the full scope of Brandon's recklessness. "Let's make something clear," she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had seen too many people assume ignorance was a defense. "The sale of the Anderson property to Westfield Development Corporation is not legally binding. Agritech Innovations, as the rightful owner, retains the right to cancel the contract within the 10-day review period, which expires tomorrow. This decision will be exercised." Brandon's eyes widened. "You can't do that. Contracts are legally binding. We have obligations. You can't just—" "I can," I said, cutting him off, my voice low but unwavering. "Because the contract contains a review period clause. Westfield Development will receive a full refund. The land remains ours. That is fact, not opinion. Your assumptions, Brandon, are not law. Chelsea's sobs escalated into panicked whimpers. But the money, the $1.2 million, we spent it. What about the house? What about my business? You spent money that was not yours to spend on vacations, luxury items, a business without clients, and now you are responsible for restitution. The house, that depends on equity. The consulting business, you don't have one yet. You have an idea and Instagram posts. That is not a business. That is not reality. Brandon finally lifted his head, his face pale, eyes wide with panic. Dad, you can't do this to us. We thought we were protecting the family's interests. You thought you were entitled. There's a difference. You assumed, you lied, and you acted without authority. That is not protection. That is theft. That is fraud. And you, my son, will face the consequences of those choices. Chairman Morrison cleared his throat. His voice trembled slightly, though he tried to maintain composure. Mr. Anderson, this is unprecedented. Canceling a development contract, exposing a family dispute in public. How will the town respond? I turned to him, calm, resolute. The town deserves the truth. Westfield Development Corporation deserves transparency. And my son, he deserves to face reality. The development will be canceled, effective immediately. The land will be restored to its original state, and any funds transferred will be returned. That is non-negotiable. Brandon sank further into his chair. You're ruining everything. My life. Chelsea's life. We can't. Your life? I said, voice rising just enough to silence the murmurs in the room. This is your choice, Brandon. You chose theft. You chose lies. You chose greed over family. You built your life on a foundation of deception, and now it's all collapsing because reality cannot be bought or manipulated. Not here, not ever. Chelsea's phone fell to the floor. She sat down abruptly, her face buried in her hands. We didn't know. We thought— You thought wrong, I said softly, my voice cutting through the grief. Intentions do not erase actions. Actions have consequences. Maggie pulled a chart from her briefcase, laying it out on the table. For clarity, here is the breakdown of civil damages. The total misappropriated funds amount to $2.6 million. $1.2 million spent on the vacation, $14,000 on the consulting business, and the remaining funds mismanaged in other expenditures. You will be required to repay this in full through restitution payments.
Brandon's face turned white. We don't have that kind of money. You'll make it over time, I said. Payments will begin immediately. Wage garnishment, asset forfeiture, or other civil remedies will be used to ensure full repayment. Your choices led here. This is not punishment. This is accountability. Chelsea looked up, her tear-streaked face filled with panic. But the house, the mortgage, the lifestyle, what happens to us? Reality happens, I said. The house is tied to equity. If there's no equity, you'll face the consequences. Lifestyle. That ends now. Instagram content does not pay bills. Social media influence does not erase debt. This is life, Chelsea. Actual life. Brandon's voice grew desperate. Dad, we were only trying to protect the family. We didn't steal for ourselves. You stole for yourselves, I said, voice firm. You claimed authority you didn't have. You acted for personal gain, and you involved Chelsea. She may have been unaware of the legal nuances, but she was complicit in decisions. Intentions matter little when actions break the law. Chairman Morrison finally spoke. Mr. Anderson, what will happen to the development plans? I turned to him. Westfield Development Corporation will receive the refund. Any survey markers, permits, or construction equipment will be removed. The land returns to its original condition. Development is paused indefinitely until the town and community can consider real sustainable options that serve everyone, not just developers. Brandon let out a strangled sound. You, you can't just cancel development, contracts, money, obligations. Contracts contain clauses, Maggie said, and this is the review period. Obligations require authority. Authority requires legal standing. You had none. The law protects the owner. The owner is Agritech Innovations. The owner is me. That is all. Chelsea sobbed openly now, shaking her head. But what about Brandon? What happens to him? I looked at Brandon, my son, the boy I taught to drive a tractor, the young man who once dreamed of running a business. Now he sat broken, humbled, and terrified by the weight of his choices. Brandon, the consequences are yours to face. You will cooperate with civil and criminal authorities. You will make restitution. You will perform community service. You will learn what real work looks like. Starting from the ground up, 1,000 hours on local farms, hands-on, no shortcuts, no Instagram posts, no credit cards, no easy fixes. You will learn respect through labor and accountability through action. Brandon's head dropped again. 1,000 hours? Community service? Yes, I said. You will learn the value of work, the meaning of responsibility, and the reality of consequences. And if you comply fully, the civil damages may be reduced to actual misappropriated funds, $96,000, rather than the total $2.6 million. But compliance is required. Cooperation is mandatory. Ignorance, excuses, and delay are no longer options. Chelsea tried to interrupt. But our social media, our brand. Gone, I said. For now. What you thought was real wasn't. What you thought was wealth wasn't. Reality has a way of teaching lessons far more effectively than wealth or entitlement ever can. Brandon finally whispered, defeated. What happens if I refuse? Then the full civil and criminal weight hits you, Maggie said calmly. The law does not negotiate with liars or thieves. Criminal charges will be filed tomorrow at 9 a.m. Civil suits will proceed by the end of the week, and the amounts claimed will be enforced fully using all legal means available. Brandon stared blankly. Chelsea's head fell into her hands again. The room was silent, save for the faint hum of the overhead lights. I turned to Chairman Morrison. This is why I wanted the town to understand. This isn't about personal vendetta. It's about truth, responsibility, and transparency. This is what happens when greed meets ignorance. This is what happens when entitlement underestimates reality. Morrison nodded slowly, swallowing hard. Indeed, illuminating, he muttered. I glanced at Brandon one last time. Tomorrow morning, you make a choice. Accountability or further disaster. The rest is up to you. The council members, the lawyers, Chelsea, Brandon, all of them sat frozen. The weight of reality had settled. I walked out, leaving them in silence. For the first time in years, the farm, the land, and the legacy felt safe. Not because of money, but because of truth. Outside, the cool air hit my face. The crops swayed gently in the breeze. The soil beneath my boots was real, tangible, alive. This is what matters. This is what always mattered. And for Brandon, the reckoning had only just begun.
The next morning, the calm of the farm was shattered, not by machines, storms, or human hands, but by the storm of attention descending from every direction. News trucks lined the gravel road, their satellite dishes pointed like antennae to the sky. Cameras, microphones, and blinking lights made the farm look like a stage, one where every act was about to be scrutinized by the public eye. Brandon's cell phone had been ringing non-stop since dawn, each call a reminder of his mistakes. Chelsea sat slumped in the corner of their living room, still in her pajamas, scrolling through social media like a hypnotized spectator. Each post, each comment, each share was a dagger in her pride. Followers had multiplied overnight, thousands more interested in the drama than in any content they had ever posted before. The irony wasn't lost on me. Fame came from infamy, not accomplishment. By 8:30 a.m., the local Oregonian reporter was already live streaming outside our property. "Billionaire farmer versus greedy son," her headline screamed. "Family feud turns into legal battle over multi-million-dollar land." The video feed captured the manicured crops in the background, a stark contrast to the human chaos now unfolding. Local townspeople gathered behind the cameras, whispering, pointing, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others smirking at the unfolding spectacle. Inside, Brandon paced like a caged animal. "Dad, you don't understand. They're going to destroy me. Everyone will think I'm a criminal. Chelsea, everyone will think we're fraudsters." Chelsea's response was a strangled sob. I didn't know it would blow up like this. I thought we were doing the right thing." "You didn't know?" I said, stepping into the room, calm but cutting. "You helped plan it. You advised on the financial decisions. You spent the money. You posted about it online. Screenshots never disappear, Chelsea. Ever." Brandon froze. His mouth opened, then closed. He was realizing what he had ignored: the permanence of digital footprints, the unyielding nature of law, the unrelenting reality of exposure. Maggie arrived shortly after, briefcase in hand, her demeanor unshaken. "The civil filing has been prepared. Criminal charges will be formally submitted to the county prosecutor at 9 a.m. We have a live record of all transactions and evidence. Your Instagram activity, Chelsea, Brandon, is part of the case." Chelsea finally looked at her phone, eyes wide in horror. You can use that?" "Yes," she said simply. "Public posts, private messages, everything. The internet never forgets, and the law never ignores evidence." By 9 a.m., Brandon had been formally served with criminal complaints: fraud in the first degree, theft in the first degree, and falsifying legal documents. Class B felonies, each one potentially carrying years of probation, restitution, and community service. The press had already started reporting. Headlines screamed across local, regional, and national outlets. The story quickly escalated beyond Oregon. CNN picked it up. Fox News followed. Local news stations replayed footage of Brandon, Chelsea, and me walking into the council room, juxtaposed with images of the luxury vacation, the extravagant lifestyle, and the empty consulting business. Social media exploded with commentary, threads, memes, outraged messages, and debates. The hashtags "billionaire farmer," "greedy son," "family fraud" began trending, turning our private family crisis into a public spectacle. Brandon tried to call his colleagues at Midwest Farm Supply. They didn't pick up. The company had already terminated his employment, and the news spread faster than he could explain. Every voicemail he left sounded desperate, futile. Even his friends, who had always assumed loyalty, were now messaging cautiously, unsure what side to take or if they should take any side at all. Chelsea finally broke completely. They're going to ruin us! All of us! How are we going to survive?" I stepped closer, keeping my voice calm but firm. "You survive by facing reality. You survive by taking responsibility. You survive by learning, not by hiding. The people in that room, the townspeople, the council, the reporters, are not the enemy. You are your own enemy until you take accountability." Brandon groaned, pacing, the weight of his choices pressing down like a lead blanket. "This isn't fair! I didn't know! I thought I was protecting the family!" "Protecting the family?" I repeated, the words sharp, precise. "No, Brandon, you were protecting yourself. You were protecting entitlement. You were protecting the illusion that because you are family, you have a right to my trust, my property, my money. That is not protection. That is theft. Outside, people began trickling closer to the farm, whispering and pointing. Children on bicycles slowed down to look at the cameras. Elderly farmers shook their heads in disbelief, muttering under their breath. Some waved at me respectfully. They had known my work, my decades of dedication to farming, to the community, to innovation. They understood the context, but the crowd wasn't here for context. They were here for drama. By mid-morning, the first news vans had begun broadcasting live updates, showing Brandon and Chelsea through the windows of our farmhouse. The reporters were relentless, narrating every movement, every expression. Brandon Anderson, heir to the Anderson farm fortune, now faces criminal charges following allegations of fraud and theft from his father. His wife Chelsea Anderson, involved in financial decisions, is under scrutiny as well. Brandon slammed the door, glaring at the cameras. "This is harassment! You can't do this! This is private property!"
"It's public interest," I said softly. "When your actions affect hundreds of thousands of dollars, involve community trust, and break the law, privacy is a luxury you forfeited. You chose visibility by choosing deceit." By noon, the civil lawsuit was officially filed. Brandon received the notice personally, delivered by Maggie. He stared at it in disbelief, flipping the pages like some abstract theory he could somehow argue away. But reality wasn't negotiable. The case demanded restitution of $2.6 million, accounting for misappropriated funds, misused vacation money, and speculative investments that never bore fruit. The payments were structured over years, with wage garnishment and potential asset seizure if compliance faltered. Chelsea finally stopped crying long enough to whisper, We have nothing." "Yes," I said, "nothing. No assets, no clients, no income, and now significant debt. This is reality. This is life without deception. And this is the only path forward: truth, accountability, and labor." Brandon slumped into a chair, head in hands. "Labor? Community service? 1,000 hours?" "Starting in January," I said. "On actual farms, doing real work, loading grain, repairing fences, mucking stalls, feeding livestock. No shortcuts, no credit cards, no air conditioning. Just honest, hard work. You will learn respect. You will learn consequences. You will learn that entitlement and laziness do not build a life, they destroy it." Chelsea tried to intervene. "But what about our social media, the consulting brand, the followers?" I shook my head. "None of that matters. Fame built on fraud is not fame. Wealth built on deception is not wealth. Real work, real effort, and real respect, that is what lasts." By evening, the local paper ran a full exposé. Front page, above the fold: "Billionaire farmer stops son's land fraud." Brandon's mugshot was printed in grayscale, eyes wide, face pale. Photos from the luxury vacation, the empty consulting office, and the Instagram posts were reproduced in black and white. Even Chelsea's face, teary and panicked, became part of the narrative. Social media erupted. Hashtags trended. Comments ranged from outrage to amusement, from sympathy to scorn. People debated whether Brandon deserved forgiveness, whether I was too harsh, whether Chelsea was guilty, whether this was a morality tale or a family tragedy. Brandon tried to call me that night, but I did not answer. Chelsea sent frantic texts, asking for advice, for intervention, for some miracle that would undo reality. I let the phone ring. The lesson was not about forgiveness or rescue. It was about learning accountability.
January arrived with a crisp chill, the kind that makes every breath feel alive, every task tangible. Brandon reported to Hendrick's family farm, just 5 miles south of our property. He arrived early,
hands trembling, face pale, unsure if he could face the day or the humiliation. Old man Hendricks, wiry and imposing, did not greet him with a handshake or a smile. Instead, he handed Brandon a pitchfork and pointed toward a row of muck-filled stalls. "First lesson," Hendricks said, voice rough as gravel. "You earn respect by getting your hands dirty." Brandon stared at the task before him. The stench of manure, the cold bite of the wind, the heavy pitchfork in his hands. It was punishment. And yet, it was also the first honest work he had ever done. Chelsea had tried to tag along once, arguing that she could help with social media strategy for the farm. Hendricks shut her down instantly. "No computers, no Instagram, no shortcuts. This is work. You learn by doing, not posting." Brandon's days were long and grueling, 20 hours a week, 50 weeks a year. He fed livestock, repaired fences, loaded 50-pound grain bags onto trucks, cleaned barns, and tilled soil under the unforgiving winter sun. At first he moved slowly, complaining and cursing under his breath, but gradually muscle memory took over. Rhythm replaced resistance, and he began to understand the nuances of farming. Every lift of a bale, every swing of a hammer, every scrape of mud from boots became a lesson in humility and accountability. Meanwhile, the civil case moved forward. Brandon agreed to pay $500 per month for 16 years to cover the misappropriated $96,000. It was a long-term plan, a constant reminder that actions have consequences that cannot be erased by excuses. Every paycheck he earned at the feed store, every hour of labor, contributed to restitution, and slowly, Brandon began to grasp the real cost of his choices. Money alone could not buy redemption. Only effort, honesty, and time could. Chelsea, however, had a different trajectory. The divorce finalized 2 weeks after Brandon accepted his plea deal. She kept the wedding ring, but lost everything else: the lifestyle, the house, the social media influence built on deceit. Without financial resources, clients, or support, she found herself isolated. Attempts to rebuild her consulting brand failed. Companies refused to work with someone publicly tied to fraud. Her follower count declined sharply as the audience lost interest in watching a life unravel without purpose or growth. Chelsea's crisis, unlike Brandon's, had no structured path for redemption. Social media could not teach responsibility. Only hard, unglamorous work could. Back at the farm, my own focus returned to the land. The crops, corn, soybeans, and winter wheat, needed care. Agritech soil sensors monitored moisture, nutrient levels, and environmental conditions in real time. The technology worked as intended, providing actionable data that enhanced yields while respecting the environment. As I walked the rows, checking the readings, I reflected on the irony. The tools I invented to help farmers thrive were also teaching my own son, albeit in a harsher classroom. Brandon's transformation was gradual but unmistakable. By March, he was visibly thinner, leaner, and quieter. His movements were more precise, his hands calloused, his eyes more aware. One day, I saw him lifting seed bags onto my truck. He nodded at me, a small gesture, almost imperceptible, but it was acknowledgement, respect, and perhaps even humility. No words were exchanged, no apologies. Actions, not statements, now defined him. The civil settlement was finalized in February. Brandon formally acknowledged his wrongdoing, signed a structured restitution agreement, and committed to completing all 1,000 hours of community service. Maggie monitored the process, ensuring compliance, while I maintained a quiet oversight. Justice was not about vengeance, it was about accountability and restoration. The farm itself underwent a quiet renaissance. Westfield Development was required to remove all survey markers, stakes, and permits. The land returned to its natural contours. Local contractors from Millbrook Valley, whom I hired personally, restored damaged areas at a cost of $47,000. Crops were replanted where construction had begun. Fences rebuilt, irrigation systems repaired, and soil sensors installed in every field. By spring, the farm looked as it had decades ago, a living testament to persistence, hard work, and ethical stewardship. In December, I attended the Anderson Agricultural Scholarship Fund ceremony, an initiative we established to support young farm kids studying agricultural technology. The first recipient, Sarah Mitchell, a straight-A 4-H champion and granddaughter of Chairman Morrison, beamed as she received her full-ride scholarship. Wearing my best overalls, I felt pride, not in money, but in purpose, in legacy, in the knowledge that my efforts were helping the next generation grow.
Brandon's community service began in earnest. Hendricks, ever strict, ensured he experienced the full spectrum of farm work, milking cows in the early morning, repairing broken dates, mending irrigation channels, learning about crop rotation, soil health, and livestock management. Brandon's Instagram was dormant, his social life limited, his ego humbled. Week by week, month by month, he began to understand that work is not punishment, it is responsibility. The slow, repetitive tasks of farming taught him patience, respect, and empathy for labor he had previously mocked or ignored. Chelsea attempted to reconcile publicly once, posting vague apologies on social media. The reaction was swift and unforgiving. Followers mocked her insincerity, brands refused sponsorship, and the online community largely rejected her narrative. Redemption, I realized, is not a performance, it is lived experience. Brandon had chosen to face the consequences. Chelsea had avoided accountability. One path led to growth, the other to irrelevance. By the end of the year, Brandon had changed in ways that no money or privilege could teach. He loaded grain bags, repaired fences, fed livestock, and engaged with farmhands respectfully. His conversations were no longer dominated by entitlement or ego, but by questions: how? Why? What can I learn? Even small gestures, like helping an elderly neighbor with fence repair or volunteering to guide interns, showed evidence of transformation. The civil restitution payments continued monthly. Brandon was earning a modest wage, paying off his debt gradually, and experiencing firsthand the value of honest labor. The community began to see him not just as the son who committed fraud, but as someone learning the difficult lessons of accountability. People noticed his effort, his willingness to work, his humility. It would take years to fully rebuild trust, but the foundation was being laid, brick by brick. Reflecting on the entire ordeal, I realized that respect cannot be inherited, it must be earned. Family is not a free pass to exploit or deceive. Trust is fragile, easily shattered, and painstaking to rebuild. By holding Brandon accountable, I was not just protecting assets or the farm. I was teaching values, responsibility, and the meaning of consequence. The farm continued to thrive, with new soil sensors, improved crop rotation, and sustainable practices. Agritech Innovations invested further in research, ensuring that the tools we developed served the community, the environment, and future generations. Brandon's story became a cautionary tale in local schools, a teaching moment in community centers, and a reminder in the public consciousness. Greed and entitlement can destroy, but effort, accountability, and learning can rebuild. Looking back, I often wonder whether family members will ever fully understand the lessons embedded in this experience.
Perhaps Brandon will, in 10 or 20 years, when the restitution is complete and he reflects on the journey from entitlement to accountability. Chelsea may never see it. Some lessons are learned only when consequences are unavoidable. But for the farm, the community, and those willing to listen, the message is clear. Integrity, respect, and diligence endure far beyond wealth, appearances, or fleeting social status. And so the farm lives on, not just as land, crops, and machinery, but as a testament to accountability, resilience, and the lessons learned when entitlement meets reality.